Coming up, with the war in Ukraine quite rightly filling the headlines, it's being used as an excuse by Rishi Sunak for the spiralling costs of living following 12 years of Tory misrule. But there's also a lot of Brexit fallout unravelling at the same time, not least the Brexit red tape, which is preventing grassroots charities from sending out aid to Ukraine's borders to help refugees. Vans loaded with supplies, clothing and bedding are getting stuck at Dover for days because of Brexit border issues. And I also want to tell you about Brexiteer Steve Baker's latest Brexit meltdown, the scathing Brexit findings of the Public Accounts Committee, and my reaction to Rich Kid Sunak's spring statement. Stay tuned. If you enjoy the channel, please like this video, subscribe and hit the bell for a reminder of each new video release. Brexiteer and leading figure in the Tories' far-right libertarian wing, Steve Baker, attacked the government's shelving of negotiations over the Northern Ireland Protocol because of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Liz Truss must act now, he whined. Liz Truss said she is acting over the protocol, which she opined isn't working, despite the fact that the majority of people in Northern Ireland across both the unionist and nationalist communities are pretty happy with having what they see as the best option post-Brexit, with many unionists in Northern Ireland now reported to have acquired an Irish passport in order to retain their freedom of movement rights, and also because they've just had enough of the current government's threats about the protocol and the inherent dangers of that stance to the Good Friday Agreement. Meanwhile, the Public Accounts Committee has been scathing in its assessment of any claimed benefits of Brexit whatsoever, criticising the government's overall approach. The cross-party committee couldn't actually identify any economic benefits from Brexit whatsoever, and said the government is being way too secretive about international trade agreements that pose a risk to British agriculture, environmental standards and human rights. Put simply, the committee is warning that the government is not being held to account as it is withholding vital information from Parliament. Tory MP Geoffrey Clifton Brown, the deputy chair of the Public Accounts Committee, said that the government couldn't identify a single tangible Brexit win for British business or consumers. I love those rare occasions when a Tory MP speaks truth to power. And he's confirming a University of Sussex analysis in 2021, which confirmed that all the post-Brexit trade deals signed by the government post-Brexit were worth a mere 0.56% of the economic hit from leaving the EU single market. So not only have the government failed to replace over 99% of trade lost through Brexit, but the Public Accounts Committee have also voiced concerns over inadequate post-Brexit consumer protection, tax fraud and modern slavery measures. Put simply, Brexit continues to cause no end of problems and is a fundamental contributor to the spiralling cost of living that predates the Ukraine invasion, which rich boy Sunak and his pals are nevertheless trying to hoodwink the public into blaming on that very same Ukraine invasion, rather than the 12 years of Tory mentality of looking after the rich and sodding the poor. I was actually furious listening to Sunak's spring statement. It wasn't so much what I was hearing, but what I didn't hear. 10 million people being plunged into fuel poverty through an energy cost crisis, and yet Sunak offered nothing to low-income households on universal credit or pensions. These households are in line to receive an uplift of 3.1%, last October's inflation rate, at a time when prices are actually rising by 6 or 7% and set to increase still further over the next few months. Sunak has made a political decision to make these millions of the country's poorest people at least £500 worse off per annum. And that's in addition to the £1,000 a year they've already had taken away from them when Sunak withdrew the £20 a week pandemic uplift. No wonder that Malcolm Walker, CEO of Iceland Frozen Food Stores, reported that people at food banks are now having to turn down offers of potatoes and carrots because they couldn't afford the fuel to boil them. Meanwhile, Sunak was boasting about raising the threshold at which national insurance contributions begin. But this is of no benefit whatsoever to pensioners and people on universal credit who don't earn enough to pay national insurance anyway. Also, Most state pensioners and benefit recipients don't have a car, so the much vaunted cut on duty on petrol and diesel also has no benefit to the very poorest either. And not only that, but the headline flagpole Tory Sunak policy of a 1p cut in income tax in 2 years' time is also of no benefit to this very poorest group. It's like the Tories don't care about the poorest and most vulnerable in society. And why would they? They know this group are the least likely group to vote. And if they do vote, it's disproportionately for parties that aren't the Tories. But these policies of bashing the poor are very popular amongst Tory voters, and more importantly, Tory MPs, whose support Sunak will be seeking when he feels the time is right to stab Blojo in the back. I find it obscene that a multi-millionaire like rich boy Sunak, whose wife is said to be richer than the Queen, is in a position where he can take over £1,500 a year off the very poorest members of society, while defending a political decision not to impose fully justifiable windfall taxes on the energy companies who openly admit to profiteering during the current fuel cost crisis, with BP recently saying they had more cash than they knew what to do with, having made £10 billion in profits last year, part of which will be distributed to their shareholders, while their CEO, Bernard Looney, is reported to be receiving a bonus, allowing him to splash out on a £5.2 million apartment while describing his company as a cash machine, after the government has handed them nearly £500 million in tax rebates since 2016. And don't think for a moment that the pandemic is any kind of excuse. This Tory government will have blown a projected £54 billion on the failed test and trace system, which has been proved to have made no material difference to the spread of the virus or on the mortality rate. And Jolyon Maugham and the Good Law Project also continue to find ever more evidence of widespread corruption and profligate spending on PPE and other medical supplies and services during pandemic emergency procurement measures. And these amount to several more £billion. A huge proportion of these billions found their way into the pockets of Tory donors, connections and family members. And on top of all this, the Tory Brexit has had a devastating effect on the British economy, with the government's own Office of Budget Responsibility saying that currently exports are 15% down on pre-Brexit levels, with worst forecast to come once Brexit regulations are fully implemented later this year. And now the Tories are insisting that the very poorest foot the bill for their corrupt Brexit and their corrupt COVID spending.